Hey everyone, this is my first YouTube video. Today I'm going to be discussing one of the things that a lot of people have been asking me about, lightsabers. They're a tricky subject, so I'm going to go over something a little bit more complicated today, because I feel like a lot of folks are going to have this problem, and I want to go over with you in detail, okay? Follow me. So, this is a lightsaber core. This is what we call a Proffie core. And you can tell it's a Proffie core because it has this chip in there. Now I have a white version, but sometimes you'll have a red one depending on what lightsaber company you buy from. Typically you have these two pieces right here, which is a single button activation. Okay? This is your single button. It's a oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It's not regular switch, it's momentary, that's the name. And this right here is your charge port. Now, the reason why I have it disassembled is because of what I wanted to discuss. Lots of folks have been having problems with this right here. This is the SD card slot, okay? This is where you load all the saber styles and all the fonts that you want to put on there, meaning how it sounds and how it looks when you start the lightsaber. Now sometimes folks will have what's called a directory not found, SD card not found. The reason is these spots right here are not connecting. So what you'll need to do is grab yourself a soldering iron. This one's here is mine. Pardon the mess and pardon how bad it looks. And you're going to need to solder those connection points back to the little solder points next to the SD card. Now I'd recommend not having the SD card in there when you do that. But you're going to want to make sure that this metal frame that holds the SD card in is pushed as close as possible to the Proffie board, so that way when you do pop the SD card in, it can properly read it. And you'll know you've done it successfully after you flash the board. When you put the
Are you a Jedi?
battery in, it should sound off like so. If not, it'll still say SD card not found, Proffie not found, or font directory not found. Now, one other thing that I want to go over is your chassis. So before I'm going to put this together, this right here is my main chamber where the battery, not the battery, the button is going to be. Now, as you can see, it's quite thick. It's made to house an LGT chassis, which means it's a modular lightsaber chassis, which means you can buy different parts and different pieces and screw them together and get them to connect. However, this one's special because it's a really, really thick CNC'd model. So, in order for me to get this chassis to work with this lightsaber, I'm going to change the mounting screws to some screws that I had lying around. Now, these were the screws that came with it, and these are just a long kind of connection nut with your small little screw. What I'm going to replace them with are some Raspberry Pi mounting retention nuts with the screw at the end, and then just use a lock nut underneath that screw. And what that will do is that'll give me about a couple centimeters, or even smaller, of a distance, so that way the buttons can go more flush with the top part of here. Okay? From right there. Film.
I am.
Oh, I'll clip this out. Okay. So, you'll notice that I stopped here for a reason. I wanted to show you what I was doing. I pushed these pieces forward so that way I can get it in the chassis once it's completely set. And the reason I did that is so I could show you how much of a difference of clearance that makes, so that way you can see it's going to match the bottom of that chassis and give you enough room for the button to come up level with the saber. Okay, so now that it's all put together, you can see how everything's all set up. And I recessed this back in after that I screwed it, because once I get these retention screws, or rather the long screws to reach those fittings, it's going to pull it up towards the middle, so that way that button comes flush with the outside of the lightsaber hilt. Now, once it's all set and complete, to make sure you've got everything all set, I'm going to move this battery wire aside, and I'm going to put this in, and you'll know it's working when it does this.
Are you a Jedi? I am.
Now, some folks may have an older version of Proffie installed. Don't mind me. I have the latest version, Proffie 6.3. If you have any questions, look at the Proffie website. They'll have the operating system and all the information on there about it. Okay, I'm going to move this wire here just so the battery sits a little bit more flush, so it doesn't get knocked loose. Now, once everything's all said and done, I have to install the battery chamber first. I put it on upside down, of course. There we go. Now, once I do install the battery chamber, let me see if I can find where the screws are. Big fingers, so we're going to use our tweezers to get them. And you want to make sure you keep track of all your screws, which is why I have everything carefully laid out here. And carefully I use with a very loose grain of salt. And from the back, I'm going to use this locking Allen wrench to push from the back. Most LGT sabers have this feature on there. You just want to make sure you get it right when you put it through. Now, my issue, what I was having was this charging mechanism was biting on the back of this lip here. So if that continues, I'm just going to push it. Before it's plugged in, I'm going to push it. Alright. And I'm going to push back. Push it. And push back. Now if it continues to do so, you might have to take it apart again and then use solder to shift it a little bit up more, because this chassis doesn't match the hilt. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get these retention screws to bite that fitting, and it should bring it up to the front. Now if it doesn't, I'm going to push it up again. And then try to screw so it brings that button further up. Now it might not bite right away, so don't be discouraged. Alright? We can also try our second screw. And that one looks like it bit. But it's not coming out right, so I'm going to try it again. Okay, so I've made a few changes, and also I used a new tool. This Allen wrench that usually comes with these sabers will bite into your fingers, as well enough seen. So you want to get a tool, Allen wrench, H2 size. I got mine, I can't remember where at, but I got mine off of the internet, and to make this much easier. Now, I encountered an issue with how level it's going to be and how high it's going to go. I could not use the Raspberry Pi one, so I replaced it back to normal. So it's only going to be able to go this high, which isn't too bad as long as your thumb can reach the button and your charger can be charged. Most chargers won't go wider than this recess anyways. So once it's set up, you still want to make sure that the power's on. And it does power on. Gyrometer's okay. Once it's powered on, we can get it all assembled. So let's go ahead and do that. First things first, I'm going to put the bottom chassis on. Now the bottom chassis I have has a ring on it, and then it has the handle. Now the LGT core, or the Proffie core, should fit directly in there, but you might have to squeeze it a little bit. Alright, if it doesn't, you're going to want to tighten this screw as much as you can. Alright. Or unscrew it, and then screw it together when it's nice and tight. Because otherwise it will not fit in these larger hilt. I had a little bit of a hiccup, but the reason why we were hitting a hiccup was these side wires for the speaker were being pinched by the plastic. You want to make sure that when you do put it back together, you want to make these side wires have this empty gap, so that way this can close flush, otherwise it will not go in the hilt. Now as you can see, I do have to push down on the Proffie board in order for it to go all the way, and that's just so it doesn't completely crush the entire unit. And now I've got the makings of a saber hilt. Okay. Now let's add the final piece. Now the final piece here, this is a NeoPixel blade. I've actually got, this is a bargain NeoPixel blade that came with the unit, but I had the retention screws screwed in beforehand before I screwed this brass piece into this metal piece here. So all we're going to do after this has been aligned is this metal ring, those metal rings are going to touch these metal pins, and that's what's going to tell it to change the colors and do the different styles of lightsabers that we want it to do. So let's go ahead and assemble that now. Now the threading is going to be a little bit tight, and that's why you hear that squeaking. It's because it's very, very fine threading. But once it's all said and done, make sure it's nice and tight, and you should have your lightsaber. Now, in order for it to be tested properly, I'm going to check to see.
Smooth Jedi.
That's my battery level. Most Crimson Core or regular Proffie operating systems will have a battery level as one of your saber fonts, and if the green light or the light is at the top, that means it's fully charged. When it's towards the middle or down, that means it needs a little bit of charge. When it usually gets to halfway point, your fonts don't look quite right. So let's go over some of the styles.
Come, little one.
This one here's a Luke Skywalker font that I found through Kyberphonic. And as you can see, it's working just fine. The gyrometer's working great. And it has clash and blaster block. Alright, even force motion and force movement. Now, one button ones are finicky because you have to hold it for a while in order for it to come down. But you can cycle through by holding for a short amount of time for silent mode, or a longer amount of time, and letting go to shift to the next style font. If you want to go to the previous style font, you hold down until it gives you the previous style font's name, and then you can let go. So, if I wanted to go back to my battery level,
Smooth Jedi.
it will tell me my battery level at the top of the saber. If I wanted to go back to the end of my list, which I've set for, I believe, Mobile Suit Gundam, and that will be a completely different cyber font. Now, as you can see, it's an unstable lightsaber with a baselet of white. And it still has the clash, but the clashes sound different now. And I made the blaster deflection blue. Now I'll make a separate video. Of how to edit these saber fonts online using the community's FET236 or 623, whichever one it is. I'll post a link in the description. But most of these cyber fonts, or saber fonts rather, are pre-existing, meaning they have the entire code, entire color, all the effects and everything ready to just copy and paste right onto the folder, and then you can edit it through there. Now I'm not going to go into saber editing in this video, but I'll show you in a later video how I do that, because it is a little bit boring and it is a little bit tedious. But as you can see, This is our fully fledged lightsaber functioning with no issues. Now, if you have any questions or concerns, please leave a comment in the video down below. I'm going to put links in the description of all the products that I use, or at least try to, at least for this one, because I know it's going to be very handy for most saber builders and saber repair people. And last but not least, you want to make sure that these Proffies are properly taken care of. You can't just comfortably slash and clash with this one, mainly just because, one, there's a shortage on these boards, so they're going to be really, really expensive in the near future, and two, these are more for a visual aesthetic rather than actual saber combat. If you want an actual saber combat that does have a visual aesthetic, I would suggest getting a Xenopixel or just a smooth baselit or EcoPixel one. They're not so expensive, they don't cost as much, but this one right here will cost you around $300 to $400. Mainly just because if you're building it yourself, the Proffie core with the chassis will be around $150. The NeoPixel blade will be about $100, and then this hilt will be another $100. So altogether, you're looking at around $300 to $400, depending on where you get it. So you want to be very cautious with this, because if you do end up breaking it, it's going to be very, very hard to get your replacement parts, and it's going to take a very long time. So that's the end of the video, folks. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions, again, leave a like and comment, and let me know what your issue is, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching.